Hello and welcome to Meet the Leader, brought to you by UONGOZI Institute. I am your host, Wamaka Kifuka. For this program, we're extremely honored and privileged to have been hosted at Flagstaff House in Accra, Ghana, by His Excellency the Vice President Alhaji Mahamudu Bawumia. We hope you enjoy this program. Your Excellency, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for hosting us here in Accra.
You're welcome.
So I just want to start, you called for this regional conference on value addition in the extractive sector. What was your motivation for bringing us together to have this discussion?
Well, I think that in Ghana, I think we've been thinking very hard about charting a new way forward. Of course, it is not news that Africa has a large of many of the natural resources of the world. Ghana is no different. We have gold, we have bauxite, we have diamonds, manganese, you name it, significantly, a significant share of these natural resources. But that has not been the issue. We felt that for the longest time as a country and similar countries in Africa, we've been essentially primary producers of these commodities, and there is very little value addition that we see in Ghana or in the continent as a whole. So we thought that we're a new government relatively. This is our first year in office, and we have led by the president a clear vision to change this paradigm, that we don't have to be just primary producers. We want to add value to these resources in the context of an industrialization program for the country. In moving forward, however, we thought that it is very, very important to organize this international conference to see what the state of knowledge is in this particular paradigm shift that we are trying to undertake, what the experiences of other countries have been, what the experiences have been from the point of view of academia, researchers, and so on. You can't claim to know it all. So it was very, very important to organize this conference, bring other African countries, bring the experts, brainstorm on some of these issues, try to chart a new way forward. I mean, we want to move forward, but we have to move forward properly and correctly with the best policies. Yeah.
Now, we want to look at both the kind of challenges and the opportunities. I'll start with the challenges. From a leadership perspective now, when we deal with the technical stuff aside, from a leadership perspective, what do you see as the challenges to enabling this kind of shift in mindset, or ultimately the value addition that you're looking for? Just, what leadership challenges are kind of in the way, or at least need to be overcome?
Well, I think that first of all, we have essentially been conditioned over the years as economies to be primary producers, right from the colonial period through the independence period to now. This is how our economies have been structured. We've been primary producers of these commodities, and we import the manufactured goods. That has been the structure of the economy. So the biggest challenge comes in changing that mindset, changing that structure. But changing that structure requires a mindset change, that to say, well, enough of this particular paradigm. We need a new paradigm shift, and therefore we need to put in place a policy framework to do that, and you need to carry the country along and everybody along with you with this new paradigm. And in moving in that direction, of course, you have interest groups that are always aligned with the status quo. Right, and so whenever you want to move into a new paradigm or a new direction, you're bound to face challenges in that regard. But I think what it takes is leadership from the political point of view, that we are fortunate in Ghana to have a president who is very clear in what he wants us to do. He set the agenda and let us move in this direction, and this is why we are moving in this direction. But other countries have done it, adding value. I mean, when you think about it, why would you not want to add value to? It doesn't make sense that everybody should want to add value to whatever resources that you are producing. I mean, because it changes your income level, you know. So if I process bauxite, if I produce bauxite and I process it into alumina, I get 33 times more than if I exported the raw bauxite. And then if I process the alumina into aluminum and alloys, I get even much more, you know. So it makes sense that you want to add value in that sense. So I'm very clear in my mind, and we are very clear in our minds that this is the direction we should go. Notwithstanding the challenges, we should persevere and change the direction.
And what really needs to be done now to get that mindset shift of saying, you know, we can do this? Because as you mentioned, there was this, you know, there's a resistance. Yes, there are interest groups, but there must also be a belief behind that this is actually possible.
I think that everything is impossible until it's done once, right? So we've seen other countries do it. So it's not, and this is why we are in this particular international conference. We've brought together other countries who have done a bit of beneficiation for the raw materials, and so we want to learn from what other countries have done. So this is not something that is rocket science, because it has been done elsewhere, and once it has been successfully done elsewhere, we are the same people, we can also do it here. So we think that it just takes the courage to get out of the comfort zone of just being a primary producer and say to yourself, we can also do it. We can industrialize, we can add value. It's not rocket science. And so you've got to have that courage to say, we will make this move. It will not be easy, because you will have a time to adjust. Your markets will change, because you're now looking for a market for more processed goods, more manufactured goods, and that sort of thing. But that is fine, that there is a market out there. But you just need the courage to make that change, and the conviction and the commitment to put in place the policy framework that will allow you to do that.
And then just one final question on this kind of negative challenges, as it were. What ultimately for Africa would failure look like if we don't get into value addition?
Well, we are staring failure in the face. I mean, we haven't gotten into value addition. And this is why you are seeing that, you know, your poverty levels are so high. We produce cocoa, right? But out of a bar of chocolate that is worth $1, we get less than 10 cents out of that bar of chocolate, even though we produce that chocolate. So the farmers cannot have, you know, increase, their incomes will not increase, and so on. So you'll see failure would look like what we are staring in the face. And this is why we are saying that we cannot really live with this anymore. You would find that your budget deficits will keep going up. Your forex reserves will always be under challenge. Your macroeconomy is going to be relatively unstable because of the volatility of prices of primary commodities, and your debt levels would go up. So, and therefore the impact on your health, your education, and the welfare of your people is adverse. And so poverty will be a challenge. And this is the challenge that African countries are living with. And this is what we need to shift away from. I tell you what, I mean, Ghana, for example, we have almost 900 million metric tons of bauxite, right? That bauxite in the ground, maybe $50 billion, right? You process it into aluminium, maybe $450 billion. Now, that's a huge difference, right? So why would I stick with the $50 billion option rather than aim to get the $450 billion. You will change the whole economic landscape, the growth, your deficits, the stability, everything, if you move into an industrialization phase for your raw materials. And this is why we are moving in this direction. It's not something that is new. Other countries have done it. And so we should have that will and conviction to pursue it. Yeah.
And then now to flip to this kind of more optimistic side of it. Again, from a leadership perspective, what opportunities do you see for value addition? I mean, you've mentioned these numbers of going from 50 to 450, but you know, what are the opportunities that it will exist or we need to push for?
I think that the opportunities for value addition is basically a transformation of the economy and a change in the structure of the economy. From this primary producing mode to manufacturing industrialization mode. That is a major opportunity to create jobs, to build infrastructure, to get more macro stability because your exports go up, your forex reserves go up, your deficits can get better under control, and so on. So economic growth and job creation opportunities are quite significant. But the important thing for Africa is to know that significant proportions of these natural resources are actually in Africa. So if there's a market for those processed goods out there, you will be able to meet that market demand because you control the primary commodity. For example, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, we control about 60% of the world's supply of cocoa. 60%. So if we collaborate properly, we will be able to impact and get the markets out there with processed, cocoa into chocolate and so on. So given the side, the quantum of the resources that Africa has, the opportunities for me are quite significant out there.
And as we start to wrap up the interview, you'd mentioned that other countries have succeeded, but other countries have also failed. Yeah. In your position as a leader, when you look out there, what key lessons have you taken from some successes, but also from some failures that you think Africa really needs to focus in on and take seriously?
Well, I think that as with everything else, you have to approach it properly. And you have to understand the framework that you're operating to, the global environment that you're operating in, and set policy which is consistent with meeting those objectives. And I think that if you look at countries, this is why we've held this conference to say we want to have the status, of what the body of knowledge as far as countries that have failed or not. You have to make sure, for example, that your framework that you set attracts sufficient quality investors that are going to come in and make sure that processing is taking place in your country. You want to also make sure that your local industries and local companies also participate in this new economy. It cannot be one in which there are no partnerships between our local companies and the foreign companies. You want good partnerships whereby you will get the technology transfer and essentially local participation in this transformation. You want to make sure that your macroeconomy is stable. You cannot compromise on that because that would always be jeopardizing whatever you want to do. And you also want to make sure that you don't fall into the type of Dutch disease type of phenomenon where you can have big increases in your revenues, or whether it's oil or whatever, and then that undermines your agriculture. For example, that even though you may be thinking about natural resources, there are other very, very important areas of the economy, especially agriculture for us in Africa. It's a major area that we should never ignore And as we pursue development in the natural resource area, we have to make sure that agriculture is developed, but more importantly, that we build the human capital, our education system. In Ghana, for example, we've just introduced free secondary school education. And that is because we need to build up the human capital. The world is really an ICT-driven world today. It's a knowledge-based economy. So whilst we want to make sure that we have the human capital to be able to add value to our natural resources, we shouldn't forget that education still remains the key. There are many countries without natural resources at all. Zero, and they're doing quite well. You know, what we are saying is that God has given us these natural resources, we should manage them properly. But if we don't manage them properly, they could even be, we could be worse off, right? Which you've seen in the case of some countries. So we want to really take advantage of the natural resources, to leverage on them, to grow the economy, to educate our people, to have the infrastructure in place, to invest in agriculture. So it's just a point of leverage. It's not to say because you have natural resources, immediately you add value to them, or your economic problems are solved. No, it's just part of the process of transformation of the economy that we want to see.
And then just as a final point to wrap up the interview, what is the one key thought you really would like to have either emerged from this discussion, or that you want our audience to take away with regards to value addition in the extractive? What is the one thing you would want everyone to know?
Well, I think that Africa has gone for too long on the side of the old paradigm of dependence on primary commodity production. Value addition, it just that obvious is that the new paradigm for us is to move towards value addition. It just makes sense. It helps us transform our economy, and it helps us move beyond aid. The dependence on primary commodities has resulted in a dependence on aid. Because we've not been able to sufficiently transform our economies to increase the savings and investment levels, and therefore we've had to depend on other people's taxes, foreign aid to help us. Now, if we can move and transition under this new paradigm to, industrializing through value addition, you are therefore in a position to move beyond aid. And this is where I think Ghana and Africa as a whole should be moving. We should move beyond aid and rely more on our resources, human and natural resources, to help transform our economies so that we can be more self-reliant.
Thank you very much for joining us on the program. It was a pleasure to hear from you, and we welcome you again at any time.
Thank you very much, Kwamako. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you.